What is your Appian way? How we lived our lives has to do with how people meet us on our Appian Way. I'm Pastor John from Livingstone's and Sunland Tujunga Seventh-day Adventist Churches, and it is time for this evening's call to prayer. You might be asking me what I mean by saying your Appian Way. Well, let's discover it in Acts. As we move forward, it's chapter 28, and I apologize. I'm going to be on the express train tonight because we're in the middle of construction and I got to get back out there. But, this is important because it's about the Word of God. So, Acts chapter 28, and if you'll remember, Paul finally makes it to Rome, but he took a road from Sicily all the way up through, I believe it's through Naples, and on up toward Rome, the beautiful city of Rome, city of God, many people would say back in the day. And the reason why is Christianity found its deep roots there, primarily because of the work of Paul. But let's continue. So as he's walking along there on his way, he had come from the ship, and they came to the Forum of Appius. This is, of course, verse 15 here. The brothers and sisters had heard that we were coming. They traveled as far as the Forum of Appius, and then the 3 taverns to meet us. At the sight of these people, Paul thanked God and was encouraged. When we got to Rome, Paul was allowed to live by himself with a soldier to guard him. See, Paul was expecting to go to a prison cell and to be sitting in a mamertium or some kind of a prison. Later in life, he was to have that. But he was under house arrest, so a soldier was to be chained to him all the time. When he goes to the bathroom, there's the soldier on a chain. All the time, Paul is connected to a Roman. That Roman soldier, lucky him, right? But yet at the same time, he gets to know who Jesus is. One of the reasons why the power of God will move forward is because of Romans who discover that there is power in the message of Jesus as opposed to their very pagan religion, which is natural religion. Much like what we have today, there are many environmentalists and other people, even other all that we call atheists today is a very religious system. They are pagan. They believe in stuff, objects, and the gods, as in the pagan world, Zeus is the god of lightning. So they worship like lightning, they fear lightning. So they say, well, there's a name behind it called Zeus. Well, we do the same thing today. We God-eyes the stock market. We God-eyes social media, TikTok, and all these things. Our whole lives are surrounded by stuff. And that's paganism. Because believe you me, even if you say you're an atheist, you worship something. But the question is whether or not that thing that you're worshiping is pointing back at yourself, or whether it is someone that really exists. And that's the difference between Christianity and paganism. Is we worship a God that is not like us. He's different than us. He is a God with his own opinions, and we must surrender to his will. But yet at the same time, this God would be willing to die for you and I. Pagan gods never die for you. You better follow them. You better do exactly what they say. You better make sure you have your electric car. You better make sure that the gods love you or Mother Earth likes you. That's how it works in paganism. But with Christianity, God comes for us. And we follow him not because we're going to be lost if we don't, but because we love him. That's the big difference. Paul gets to Rome, and he sees all of these people on the Appian Way. I can imagine him after being thrown out in Jerusalem, thrown in a prison for 2 years in Caesarea Maritime, after going through all of the difficulties and trying to even convince, Festus and Felix and Agrippa in the message of Jesus. Even through all of that, I'm sure he began to become disillusioned. Yes, on his trip on the boat, God showed his power and Jesus spoke to him and said the ship may be destroyed, but everyone will escape with their lives. But it can be very discouraging, destroying on the spirit. And the devil attacks in that way. He makes us feel like what we do doesn't matter. In pastoring, we experience this. When you're working so hard and then there's only 5 people there, or and I've experienced this many times in my life. That's why I'm past that. But you have done so much for the people that are in your community, and yet your people then don't care, it seems. Well, it's amazing when God's people start to pour out their love for you. These people came to the Appian Way. Let me show you some pictures of the Appian Way. There's a beautiful shot. The aqueduct along the Appian Way. This aqueduct is bringing water to Rome. But most likely Paul didn't walk past this aqueduct, but maybe he did because he was on the way on down to Naples. So it's very possible that he walked past this aqueduct. He certainly walked on this way. This is the way into Rome proper. Look at that. I remember as a child, when I was very young, I went to Rome. I was 7 years old. Actually, I turned 7 in Switzerland. I was with my grandfather and grandmother and mom and dad and a group of people, and we all went around Europe in 2 VW buses. We drove from one place to the next. We went to Appian Way, and my grandfather, I'm looking and it's just a road. And Grandpa Aiken says, John, he was in the general conference, he was an ASI at the time. Grandpa was he was the South American division president at one time. He was in radio and television, connecting with HMS Richards and George Vandeman to make sure that our church could fund those radio and television things. When Adventism was against TV and radio, he fought for it. And there's even articles behind me about him saying that God uses all these means. So Grandpa, as an older man, at the time, I think he was in his 60s, he said, John, he looked at me, I'm 7, he got down. John, you see this? Here, I'll show you. You see these bricks here? See these lines on the bricks? That's the cuts of the chariots when they're riding on it. They've cut lines into it, just like the road. But do you see right here? Paul walked here. Paul did everything for God, and yet he was walking on his way to death. How would you feel if you were Paul? I said, I would feel sad. And he said, well, let me add something else. John, guess what? In this area, there were many people that came from Rome that Paul had never met, and they came and they hugged him, and they accepted him in. They knew he was coming because he had the message of life. How would you feel if you met them? I kind of said, I'd feel good. Yeah. And Grandpa said, this is the life of ministry. We walk a lonely path. But in the end, it's not lonely if we're doing God's will. He always will let us see his work. Then he continued talking with the rest, and it hit me. It hits me now. We all are on Appian's way of life. All of us. We do not see the benefit of following Jesus sometimes. In fact, a lot of times. We lose a lot of things in this world. At least that's what we're told by the world, by following him. We don't eat the same things. We don't talk the same way. We're not what the world considers successful. Yet, as you're walking on that Appian Way, and you come near the end, you see, there is purpose. God does walk with you. When he got to Rome, Paul was then allowed to live by himself with a soldier to guard him. 3 days later, he called together the local Jewish leaders. When they had assembled, Paul said to them, "My brothers and sisters, I have done nothing against the people or against the customs of our nation or our ancestors. I was arrested in Jerusalem. I was handed over to the Romans. They examined me and wanted to release me, but I was not guilty of any crime deserving of death. But the Jews objected, so I was compelled to make my appeal to Caesar. I certainly did not intend to bring any negativity against our people. For this reason, I have asked to see you and talk to you because of the hope of Israel that I am bound to by this chain." What he's saying is, he was accused of things he never did. And I, as a pastor, have been accused of things that I never did. And it's funny how when the authorities dismiss you and say, "We don't see anything," it's those that have emotional claim, those who really know how to hate. They're good at hating you. And so they continued to throw things at him, which actually benefited the Christian work. Because of that, he appealed to Caesar so that he wouldn't die at the hands of the Jewish people. He was taken to a prison, and on the Roman taxpayer, he headed all the way to Rome along the Appian Way. And that is why Christianity has moved to the world. For Rome was the owner of the then known world, essentially. The biggest nation that had ties to pretty much every nation on the earth, the then known world. Out of that spring came living water, Christianity, that was to feed the world. How is it that a small town, Nazareth, could have a great prophet, Jesus, or the Son of God, and him to die alone, but yet the entire world to know his name? It's because Jesus asked Paul to bring his word. And it took those Jewish people that hated him so much to force him to appeal to Caesar. When I get accused of things I did not do, I should say thank God, because God turns those lemons into lemonade. My friends, on your Appian Way, who will meet you? I suggest you give your life to Jesus. He will make your Appian Way sweet. As you end your life, as you do your job, God will bless you by spreading your word out. As long as it's his word that's intermingled with yours, he shall use you like a spring of living water. I'm so glad you're here with me. We're about to go into intercession. It's almost 7:15, so it's time to go. God bless you all, and we'll pray together in intercession in the next few minutes. I'll see you there. Bye-bye. Bye.